Rayman was originally the idea of one man called Michael Ansel and was in development for the Super Nintendo CD. However, when the Nintendo CD project failed to appear, the development was moved on to the next generation of systems, starting with the Atari Jaguar. It's funny how one of the Jag's best looking games was also one of the first, and the only one made by what we could call a quality studio. As this was Rayman's first outing, the action is a lot tamer than later titles, and in this day and age quite slow, but it did show that the Atari Jaguar had potential. The game boasts a wonderful colourful land that the Super Nintendo or Mega Drive could never dream of recreating. It also features pretty large sprites for the time with fluid animation. Upon starting Rayman, there's not much you can do except jump. Additional powers are obtained during the game after completing every other stage. Such additional powers include a telescopic punch, holding onto ledges, grappling flying rings, using his hair as helicopter blades to glide, and running. These powers are granted to Rayman by Bettila the Fairy, while others are given temporarily from his friends that are used for specific levels only. With 6 worlds to explore and each being split into various sections, there sure is a lot to have you coming back time and time again, if not to see more of each area, then to find out where all the hidden cages of Electoons are. There are 6 to find on each stage. Some are obvious to find, while others require a little more exploration.
Together in peace, the great Protoon provides and maintains the harmony and balance in the world. Sorry, folks, this apparently can't last.
The second platform Rayman appeared on was the PlayStation. This port features many improvements over the original Jaguar version, starting off with a CD introduction, which is an improvement over the original stills. The in-game graphics are now even lusher with colour and extra graphical effects. Then we have the excellent CD audio, which really adds a lot to the gameplay. What was once a very good looking game and fun to play game on the Jaguar has just become so much better on the PlayStation.
Tell you the story of Rayman!
The third port came to the Sega Saturn. What we have here is basically the PlayStation version, Unfortunately, due to the Cinepak video codec used by the Saturn early in its life, the opening movie doesn't look anywhere near as nice, but not to worry. The developers sure had fun with the Saturn port, it would seem. Graphically, it's the same as the PlayStation version, but now loads faster and features more special graphical effects at the end of each stage. The game also seems to run a little smoother, or maybe that's just my imagination. After the Saturn came the MS-DOS release. This is a mixed bag. Graphically, it doesn't look as clean as the Saturn or PlayStation versions, but does feature more graphical effects than the PlayStation and different effects than what are found on the Saturn. It also contains more speech. Rayman can now actually speak when left waiting, as does the dude who lost his clothes in the flood area. Is this better than the console versions? Well, it does have its bonus points, but even running on max settings for its time, the console ports are still smoother and look nicer overall. That's not to say the MS-DOS version is bad, far from it. Just a little different. Rayman on the Game Boy isn't exactly a port of the original game, but more a rearrangement of it. That's more suited to the limited hardware, and it's quite a good rearrangement as well. Controls are tight, collision is pretty good, and stage design works well on the Game Boy screen, without making you feel claustrophobic. The only truly bad thing that can be said about this game is how awful the music is. Still, you could always turn that off in the options. I guess the developers knew it was awful. The Game Boy Advance version was developed by Digital Eclipse, and we all know what I think about Digital Eclipse. As with most of their output, I can't help but feel this is a half-assed effort. The game is clearly based upon the PlayStation or Saturn games, yet rather than redrawing the sprites to make them fit onto the Game Boy Advance screen, they've just cropped in on everything, giving this game, like so many others, a cramped feel, and not being able to see enough of the play area at times. This really affects the game's difficulty, and I think Digital Eclipse knew this, as you start off with more power in this port. Gameplay is actually well done. Rayman controls great, but unfortunately the scrolling can be choppy at times, which does hurt the game a little. What hurts the game more though is the nasty gritty music that the Game Boy Advance is so famous for. It's one of the main areas that really puts me off the Game Boy Advance. But just like the Game Boy Color version, you can also turn off the music in this port. Rayman on the Game Boy Advance isn't that bad. It's colourful and looks nice on the Game Boy Advance screen. It's just a shame it has issues here and there. And let's take a look at all those versions of Rayman running side by side.